Sounds like a good year for an apocalypse. The Last of Us, killer fungus, just infected its first human. This is in March of 2023. Gaming Bible. Nation, if you can't, it's a good. Just curious about these things. Yeah, well, let's see. The 61-year-old man has been infected by a plant fungus after a jump between a plant and human for the first time. Um, yeah, it sounds a lot like The Last of Us. Have you been living under a rock? Blah, 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 blah. As reported by our friends at the Lad Bible, an Indian plant mycologist has contracted a fungal disease after suffering from flu like symptoms for months. The man was also struggling with swallowing for 3 months. Can't relate. That sounds bad. Doctors eventually carried out scans and discovered a huge abscess in his windpipe. The abscess was then drained, and samples were sent to the infectious lab for testing. Analysis of the sample indicated the man had been infected with Chondrostrium purpureum virus, which, with dang, excuse me, with this making the first time the fungus has jumped from a plant to a person. In plants, the fungus causes silver leaf disease and spread via airborne spores. Foliage turns out an off metallic color and eventually dies away. The no, the mycologist was studying this when he contracted the fungus himself. It's claimed that the man has been working with the study material for a long time before he fell ill himself. While experts said that this raises serious questions, rest assured zombies aren't taking over the world just yet. Okay. This was talked about, reported through the Lad Bible. Let's see this. Does anyone recall the old YouTube video of the man in Southeast Asia who had tree-like growths where the appendages should be? I do not. The man who was not named in the journal Medical Mycology. Okay. Is this the actual... Okay, so here's the actual study. Because a lot of this stuff could potentially be made up, but if this is an actual study, this is from Science Direct. Chondrostrium purpureum is a plant fungus causing silver leaf disease in plants, particularly of the rose family. Here we report a case of paratracheal abscess caused by C. This is the first of its kind of a case wherein the plant fungus caused disease in a human. Conventional techniques, microscopy, and culture failed to identify the fungus. Only by sequencing, the identity of this unusual pathogen could be revealed. This case highlights the potential of environmental plant fungi to cause human disease in humans and stresses the importance of molecular techniques to identify causative fungal species. Silverleaf is a fungal disease of trees caused by fungal plant pathogen. Hosts with compromised immune systems are vulnerable to fungal infections, but healthy and immunocompetent individuals are also frequently reported to have fungal infections. In this situation, the effects may be associated with exposure to a large inoculum. Structural and systematic differences between plant and animals provide various challenges for microbial invasion. At the cellular level, plant and animal cells are structurally similar. Few among the millions of fungal species fulfill four basic conditions that are necessary to infect and invade human or animal hosts: high temperature tolerance, ability to invade the human host, ability to lysis and absorption of human skin, and the resistance of the human immune system. Although different evolutionary pathways of plant and animal pathogens exist, evidence of humans or human infections by phytopathogens has recently emerged. Global warming, alteration of ecosystems, international travel and commerce, and unplanned urbanization may be responsible for emergence of not only newer fungal infections but also various zoonotic, viral, and bacterial diseases. Okay. Is anyone prion? Prions are a little different. Prions are a whole different bag of worms. Um, okay, so it looked like it did happen. Interesting. See, among millions of fungi present in the environment, only a few hundred of the fungi are able to infect humans and animals. That animal and human disease can be caused by plant pathogens is a new concept that raises serious questions regarding the propensity of such infections to occur in healthy as well as immunocompromised individuals. The fungi can escape the phagocytosis phagocytosis, that was not a slur, pathways, and is able to invade the host immune system, then they can establish themselves as human pathogens. These fungal species are able to grow at 35 to 37 degrees Celsius, can become a human pathogen or commensal flora. The pathogen enters the human body through damaged skin and the respiratory tract and can cause infection mostly in immunocompromised individuals. Wait, this sounds exactly like The Last of Us. Well, it kind of does, but this type of fungus doesn't, like, it's not a cordyceps. It doesn't take over the the body or anything. It's just an infection. So it's not good, but it's cordyceps are a whole different thing. So cordyceps. Real mushroom cordyceps capsules. Why would you cordyceps on ants? Ant zombie fungus. Let's see. Let's see. Ant zombie fungus. Let's do something that's not going to. Let's see. PBS eons.
Around 48 million years ago, in a warm subtropical forest in what's now Germany, zombies were on the march. These zombies were ants, and their bodies and behavior were no longer under their control. They had become infected with the spores of a fungus that was now growing inside them. This fungus was actually manipulating their movements, forcing them to do something they'd never ordinarily do, something strange and specific. The ants abandoned their colony, climbed up a nearby plant onto the underside of one of its leaves, and bit down hard on the leaf's veins, locking themselves into place. This behavior is known as the death grip, and as the name suggests, it's the last thing these ants would ever do. Soon the fungus sprouted, probably from their heads, releasing spores to infect new hosts and continue the cycle. All that was left behind were the marks on that ancient leaf. It fossilized and was published in 2011, complete with the distinctive death grip scars. This single fossil leaf is the oldest known evidence of zombified ants, which still exist today. Modern zombie ants even perform the exact same death grip behavior, something healthy ants...
It's crazy to me how you can determine something like that based on fossil evidence of a plant. Like, it astounds me that we're able to actually find something as simple as a leaf with little marks on it and be like, that's because the ant grabbed onto it. It's crazy to me.
Never do. So we know that this creepy capability to manipulate behavior is ancient. But how and why did it come to exist in the first place? Well, it turns out the fungus's ability to turn ants into the Walking Dead may have evolved as a response to the development of an equally complex behavior of the ants themselves, a thing called social immunity. Over hundreds of millions of years, many fungi have become specialized for infecting insects and other arthropods. Generally, it happens like this. A fungal spore will attach to a host, penetrate its exoskeleton and start growing within its body. Eventually, when the fungus is ready, it erupts from the host and releases spores to find and infect new victims. And if you're an old school sci-fi fan like I am, then I know exactly what you're thinking, and you are right. These fungi are basically xenomorphs, and the insects that they infect are like human space colonists whose last moments will be watching parasites explode out of...
It is strangely beautiful, though. Like, I don't know how to, if that makes sense to you, but it is, to me, it's strangely beautiful.
Of their bodies. The insects have it a little better, I guess, because they're dead before the xenomorph pops out. Anyway, only some fungi have worked behavioral manipulation, aka zombification, into this cycle. And none of them infect people, so don't worry. Probably because they're adapted for infecting arthropods specifically, which makes it really hard for them to jump to other animals. In any case, the most well-known of these fungal puppet masters are probably the species of Cordyceps that infect and manipulate ants. And this manipulation has become incredibly fine-tuned over evolutionary time. When the ants are forced to death grip on the undersides of leaves, they do it at a specific height, around 25 centimeters above the ground, and at a specific time of day, when the sun is...
The structure that develops in the wake of Cordyceps is elegant indeed. Yeah, and the crazy thing is, like what he just said, like there's a specific height that they go to. Like it controls them to such an extent where like the exact height that they have to do this in order for things to go the way that the fungi want. It's so, like, this is why it's hard to, like, to me, I look at that and be like, nature's incredible. Some people might look at it and be like, well, how can you say that's nature? That's obviously God. I can understand the argument because it's a crazy, amazing thing that's going on. So, like, it's try to be understanding of other people's perspectives. But to me, I look at that and I'm like, nature has it down. Nature knows what it's doing.
Is highest. This is probably to ensure optimal temperature and humidity for the reproductive part of the fungi to erupt and spread its spores.
Hey, you guys want to listen to this? Oh, shoot, that was a... If that happens again, I get a lot of spam calls and I like messing with them. So if I get another spam call, we'll mess with them. I want to go answer that. See if I can get them back on real quick.
Thank you for calling Radius Global Solutions LLC, now servicing accounts previously serviced by Frontline Asset Strategies. Located at 955...
Yeah. Don't know what that is.
Which fungi often need very...
I don't know how you were able to highlight my name because I can't find it. I was mistaken. I think it was Chondrostrium purpureum. Well, look here. We found it before I finished typing.
particular
Nice.
conditions to do. Positioning the ants on the underside of a leaf might also give the growing fungi protection from UV damage and rain. And directing the ants to bite down around noon might ensure that, by the time they die hours later, the fungi can begin to emerge at night when it's cooler. Researchers have even found evidence that these fungi have tweaked their strategy over millions of years to keep up with their changing environments. See, leaf biting is the typical behavior of...
Sell them lizard insurance. Yeah, well, it's usually, I'm sure you guys get this too. It's usually like it's insurance recently. So like for a while it was somebody trying to buy my house, which I don't have a house. My parents do. I mean, I rent, but they're like, how much do you want to sell your house for? And I'm like, well, how much are you going to give me? And then I'll usually say an inappropriate thing to them and they usually get mad and hang up. But the same thing with they've been trying to sell me life insurance. Hello, sir. How old are you? That's a terrible impersonation, but you get the idea. And I'm like, I'll tell them, I'm 45. And they're like, do you live in a nursing home or whatever? Then I'm like, yes, I live in a nursing home. And usually they'll stop and be like, stop wasting my time. Or I've had some unhinged things. I've also said, like, can we sweeten the pot? Like with the house stuff. If they're wanting, I'm like, well, how much is the house worth? And they're like, it's worth like we'll see on here it's worth 45,000 or 450,000, whatever they say that it's worth. And I'll say, well, can we sweeten the deal? And they're like, well, let me send you to my manager. And I'm like, all right, let's do this. So I get sent to a guy who speaks a little better English, but his name is Steve. And always Steve or Mike or something like that. And it's like, that's not your name. But anyway. And my favorite go-to is only if I can suckle your nuts in my mouth is my favorite one to go to, just because it throws people off. I don't really want that. I don't roll that way, but it's funny to me. It's so funny. I love that. And they usually start getting really mad at me, and they'll curse at me. They'll call me slurs and all this stuff. I had one guy. One time, we went through this whole process. I don't even remember what it was about. It was like a year ago or something like that. And they we went through this whole process where I'm like, yeah, no, that sounds good. And he was asking for my social security number and my address and all that kind of stuff, my age. And I gave him wrong information. And he's typing in, and he realized, as soon as he realized that I gave him the wrong number, he goes, well, fuck you, you white monkey. He called me a white monkey. And I'm like, I find that so funny. I find insults funny. I find people insulting me to be funny. But this Indian dude called me a white monkey. You give me your nuts, I'll give you my else. Perfect.
Of zombified ants in tropical forests dominated by evergreen plants.
Well, look at that. We got some here in Florida. I gotta go find that. Cordyceps in Florida.
Temperate forests filled with deciduous plants, which shed their leaves, zombified ants almost always perform their death grip on twigs and bark instead. To dig into this difference, researchers sampled DNA from Cordyceps fungi that infect ants from as many locations as they could, including both temperate and tropical species. Then they used that data to create a family tree for these fungi, mapping out the evolutionary relationships between the different species based on their genetic similarity. And this family tree suggested that, while leaf biting is the ancestral trait, the shift to biting twigs and bark evolved convergently at least 4 times between 20 and 40 million years ago. The researchers hypothesized that this was the result of changes in climate and environment that occurred over that period. Because around 47 million years ago, in the mid-Eocene epoch, when that fossil leaf from Germany dates to, the world was a much warmer place and had less seasonal change. Back then, evergreen...
Bro, they do feel like they're inconvenienced. They do feel like they're inconvenienced. They're like, a lot of times they'll say, don't waste my time. That's the funniest part.
Forests went from the equator to the far north and south, even approaching the poles. So it makes sense that, as the study suggested, manipulating ants to lock onto leaves would have been the original strategy. But as the climate cooled during the late Eocene, tropical and subtropical evergreen forests were gradually replaced by temperate deciduous forests at northern and southern latitudes. Zombified ants that only gripped onto leaves in these regions would have fallen to the forest floor when the leaves were shed. And because the fungus seems to have pretty picky requirements when it comes to temperature and humidity, this would have been a major problem. One that provided a pretty strong selective pressure for ensuring that the ants bit onto something a little more secure. Okay, but why did such a complex ability evolve in the fungi in the first place? I mean, this seems like a really complicated way for a little fungus to reproduce. Why not just release your spores into the air and call it a day? That's what I would do. Well, the fossil record doesn't really give us a clear answer. The oldest known example of a fungus parasitizing ants is an ant trapped in amber dated to between 45 and 55 million.
I love the amber stuff. Real quick, have you guys seen the dinosaur feathers in amber? It's in amber. Look at this crap. Look at that. It's a dinosaur tail in amber with feathers and everything. How incredible is that? That's the thing. It's like the farther we get into... Look, you can even see the vertebrae on it. This is what I don't get about... Like, there is plenty of evidence of this stuff. Like, there's literally fossilized amber with... Look at the feathering on that. Look at that. That is a dinosaur's tail that was caught in amber.
Years ago. And it clearly shows a fungus erupting from the ant's body, specifically from its butt, which is probably the most embarrassing way you could be immortalized for eternity. That's high on the list of ways I did not want to go. As amazing as this fossil is, though, it can't really tell us how or even if the fungus was controlling the ant's behavior back then. It might have just infected and killed the ant without manipulating its behavior, like many species do today. But we can use DNA, again, to give us insights into the history of ant zombification, this time right back to its origins. In a paper published in 2019, a team of researchers analyzed the DNA of over 600 species within the order of fungi to which Cordyceps belongs. This more extensive family tree suggested that the modern group of Cordyceps that zombifies ants can trace its origins to an ancestor that infected beetle larvae. Now, Cordyceps infect many species of beetle today, but those fungi don't manipulate the behavior of their hosts at all. So the researchers hypothesized...
Butt fungus, is that the next one I should do? What if it's something embarrassing? I was trying to keep it a little clean, but obviously that wasn't clean. But I would definitely say some really inappropriate things to them at certain points, but, you know, at least that one was just, you know, embarrassing myself for trying to. Like, they get so mad. And you know, if it was like a legitimate health insurance person, they would not say stuff like that. But also, people that are legitimately trying to sell you health insurance are not going to, are probably not going to be from India. Not that there's anything wrong with somebody from India, but like if it's an outsourced thing like that, it's obviously a scam. Live in New York and here, but I lived in Florida for a couple of years back in early 2000s. I did telemarketing whenever I got spam calls at home. I'd pitched and my deal and confused. That's awesome. So you're one of the few that went from Florida to New York rather than from New York to Florida. Well, I don't mean any offense by this, but I wish there were more people like you that would leave Florida. I do.
That what led to the emergence of zombification was the fact that the fungi switched hosts from solitary beetles to insects like ants and wasps because, and this is the important part, those insects are more social. Highly social insects, like ants, have some impressive group strategies to defend themselves against pathogens. And one of those defenses is what's known as social immunity, the collective defenses against disease that have developed within social groups, like ant colonies. See, ants live in very close quarters and don't have much genetic diversity within a colony, and those are perfect conditions for the spread of pathogens.
That makes sense.
So a pretty strictly enforced public health system has evolved to keep the colony safe. Ants groom each other to clean off spores, quickly remove or destroy dead bodies, and if an individual shows signs of infection, they're often kicked out of the colony or even killed. And this system of social immunity is pretty effective at stopping the growth of fungus from hosts that die inside the colony. It takes hours to days.
Got a call from the Department of the State, but it's an individual from India or Asia. Like, bro, exactly.
After the host dies for the fungus to emerge and disperse its spores, and by then the ants have usually destroyed or discarded the corpse. But by manipulating the host to leave the colony and die at a spot nearby instead, usually close to a busy foraging trail, the fungi could evade the colony's social immunity. And this would ensure that there'd be enough time and the right conditions to emerge. Now, there are still many mysteries to be solved surrounding zombie ant fungi, like how exactly they take control of their hosts to manipulate their behavior. We just don't know how they do that. But this ability clearly has ancient roots, stretching back tens of millions of years. Over that time, it's changed to suit the fungi's changing environment, as well as their changing hosts. And it's this ongoing arms race between pathogen and host that seems to have led to the emergence of zombification in the first place, as the perfect counter to a complex behavioral defense. Which is pretty messed up when you think about it. I mean, all the ants wanted was to keep their colony free of disease, and instead, they got zombies.
Zombies. Oh, if that did take over people, that would be a big deal. But there's reasons why they haven't. I mean, not saying that it's impossible, but You know, it's just one of those things where people love to think about the macabre, and you know, the, I've seen something they were like global warming could cause there to be cordyceps that come over to people. It's just there are fungal infections that do attack people now, and even the article read earlier, it wasn't a cordyceps. That was just a certain specific type of fungus that ended up infecting a person. It's there. They have very specific ways that they do things.